All right, to get started on our 960 site, I've set up a folder. I called my folder Web 960. I have a hard drive, a D drive in my computer. So I have Web 960 as a folder I created, and I made an index file, which you can see over here, that has basically the things that came out of that template. It has the doc type, HTML, the character set. I called the title my 960 page. And then I have those links. The first three are the 960 framework, the reset, the text formatting, and then the 960 framework file. So those CSS files are imported first. And then I have my own file, which I called site.css. Okay. And that's where I'll put any CSS that I write for my web page. Okay. And then my body. And then the one thing I've put in my body is this div that says class equals container 12. We're going to be using a 12-column website for this. So everything on our site is going to go inside this container 12. Okay. So that goes, everything we do is going to be inside here. Okay. All of our columns, definitions, everything goes inside this container 12. If we wanted to use the 16-column framework, this would have to be container underscore 16. If it was the 24-column framework, it'd be container 24. We're using 12, so we're using the class they provided for us. It's in this 960 file if you want to go look at it. We're going to use the container 12 class that was provided for us. Okay, and that's what initially sets up all of our columns. In my site CSS, I've done one thing, and I've made the background color of the body black, and then I made a bunch of, again, I've told you in the past, you should call classes by their function and what they do, not so much by what they contain. But for this demo, I want to be able to make my sections different colors, so I made up a .red class that sets the background color for a section to .red, and I made that for orange, yellow. I did the whole Roy G. Biv. If you remember your colors of the rainbow from science, Roy G. Biv: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So I've got some classes set up there, so I can quickly change the background colors on some of these columns so that we can actually see what happens. It makes it easier. So if you want to get this set up to follow along, go ahead and pause your video right now. It's really simple as copying one of these, pasting it a few times, and then going and changing all the color names. But that'll make it easy for us to, I always do that when I do page layouts. It just makes it easier to see your page layouts before you actually have content in there. So I'm going to minimize my folders here, and you can see here's my web page, and it's got the black background. And the first thing I want to do is show you where this is, this container 12. You can't really see it on the page, right? So the container 12 class was defined in the 960.css, but I want to add something to it. I don't go change the 960 CSS file. I think I can do this. I can do .container 12. Okay. Now that will override, anything I put in here will override the container 12 settings in the 960 file. But the only thing I'm going to put in here is a background color, and I don't think there's any defined in the 960 files. I'm going to put a background color white. Okay. I'm going to save this and refresh. And we don't see anything yet, but that container is there. We don't see anything because there's no content. So let me just I'm going to put a line of content in my HTML document and hit refresh. And you can see that. So there's a white background, and I want to expand. You can see this white background. That container is 960 pixels wide. So we're going to have a white page with black around it for the rest of the body. So the white will define our page. And inside here, inside this container, it's only one line long right now. It will expand to fill our stuff, but it will have a white background. All right, so what kind of page do I want to build? Let's start with a mock-up. So I told you I don't use the traces. I use OpenOffice, LibreOffice. It's free. They have the draw program. I went in here and grabbed the rectangle tool and just put some rectangles roughly on a page. I want my page to look something like this. Okay, so I have a header up here. Great. Down here I have 2 columns. This one's fairly narrow. This one's a little bit wider. Okay, good planning. I would say this is probably 2 columns and this thing is 10 columns. Okay, then I'm going to have some content in here, and I want to divide 2 columns inside of this 10 columns that I have here. So that would make each of these, if this is 10 columns, these would be 5 apiece, right? Okay, so we'll look at that in a little bit. And then some more area, and then a footer area. Okay, it's not a huge, hard, complicated layout. We're going to do the main layout, and then we'll come back and do these columns inside another column, because that's a little special thing. There's a little class that helps you with that. So that's what I'm going to look to make. So the first thing I'll make is a header. So let's do that. Inside my container, I'm going to make a header, and we know we have semantic web. We can do a header like this. Now our header went all the way across. Meaning it took 12 columns. So we're going to add a class here. Class equals, and we're going to put grid underscore 12. So anytime you want to make something all 12 columns, you use grid underscore 12. Guess what you do if you want to make it 4 columns? You use grid underscore 4. If you want to make it 3 columns, you use grid underscore 3. Every single one of these classes has already been defined with the math done so that everything adds up to that 960 in the end. We want to probably be able to see this header. I'm going to put some text in here. I'll just put the word header in there. Let's refresh it. And you can see header up there. Okay. But I also want to put in, let's do one of our classes. We'll just start with, I'm going to add, so we can do 2 classes. We can apply 2 classes to this. I'm going to apply grid 12, and I'm also going to apply red. Okay. So now you can see my header section. Here it is. It's 12 columns wide, and it's automatically got that 10 pixel margin on both sides that we talked about. Great. Doesn't look like much. Let's go over here. I'm going to add header height equals 100 pixels. Let's try that. That's a colon, not an equal. There we go. I'm going to do 100. I paused it there to figure out what I was doing wrong because I didn't want to waste a bunch of time. It didn't take me long, but 100 pixels. There we go. The next thing I had for my layout, I had this column, which I said is probably like maybe 2 columns. Let's make that 3. And we'll make this one, if that's 3 and it has to be total of 12, we'll make it 3 and 9, right? So let's set up a couple more columns. So I need divs for those. Okay. Now, we've talked about in the past that a side and section and those are actually just divs. So I'm going to call this one aside because it is an aside. It just makes it easier to understand what it is, but I could use div as well. It wouldn't make any difference at all. Here's my aside. Here's my slash aside. And I want to put the word aside in there so we can see it. And I am going to apply to this class equals we'll do grid underscore 3. Now I can always come back and adjust this if I want to. And then we'll make this orange as well. I need to put that inside. So I'm going to use my orange class that I set up. Save it and refresh it. There's my aside. What did I do wrong? Why is all of a sudden is it not in my... It's because I put it outside of my container. Now all these slash divs, I'll move my container slash div down. This all needs to be indented one level. There we go. Sometimes it really helps when you get long code. Let's put in a comment here. End of container 12. That'll help me remember not to put anything past this div. Things need to go inside the container. Okay. So we can see that my left side, there's 3. I'm going to do this again. Let's do a section. Actually, we can use a div. Let's just use a div. You can intermix these. You shouldn't. So I'll use a section. Be a little bit consistent. This is where my main content's going to go. Let's make this. We said this is going to be class grid 9. Grid underscore 9, and red, orange, yellow is our next class that I want to use for background color. Save it, refresh it, and so there's my grid 3 and there's my grid 9, and you can see it makes it 960 perfectly with the margins and things on the sides. If we want to, we can come over here, or give it some height since we don't have any content. Height. We'll go ahead and let's do 400 pixels. It's going to be a big section. Now, when we start adding content, we may not want to put a height in there. We might want to let it adjust automatically. So that's for my aside. Let's do it for my section. Remember, we can have more than one section, just like we can have more than one div. If we're going to do that, we might as well use divs and name them. And I'll make its height 400 pixels as well. So right now they're just big enough to fill the content, which is one line. We force a height, they'll get a little bit bigger. It's starting to look like our page. Actually, I want to make it a little bit longer than that, because I want to make it look a little bit more like my diagram that I had used at the beginning. There it is. So you see how easy it is to make columns. You don't have to go in and do a bunch of calculations or anything. I did a grid 12 here. I did a grid 3 and a grid 9 adds up to 12. What happens if I take it over? What happens if I make this grid 10? Okay, now I have 13 in a 12 column layout, right? What's going to happen? Well, there's not room, so it moves it down. Not exactly what we wanted to happen, right? So you need to make sure things add up to 12. So we'll change that back to a 9. And it works just fine. What happens if I only make this grid 2? Okay. Notice it moved everything over and didn't fill up this last column over here. Probably not what I wanted, right? Maybe I did. Maybe I did. What if we wanted to do 3 columns? I could add I could do a, well, we'll see that in a little bit. Well, we won't see a 3 column, but you can do a 3 column by doing 4, 4, and 4, or 6, 3, and 3, as long as they add up to 12. There is a way, if you want to leave extra space between something, and very rarely would you want to do this, you could actually use a push. There are push classes built in. And if I say push underscore 1, it will push this yellow section over by 1 column. For a simple web page, you probably won't need that. So this was 2, and this one was 9, but I told this one to push over by 1 column, which moves it to the right and left the empty column here instead of on the right side. Okay. There's also pull, which will pull a column to the left. So push moves it to the right, pull pulls it to the left. You generally probably won't need those if everything adds up to 12. But I thought I'd tell you they're there. Okay. And then our last section is going to be our footer. Well, it's going to be a lot like our header, right? Because it goes all the way across. Footer. And I'm just going to go ahead and do it right here while I'm doing it. Class equals grid 12. And we'll also give it a class of green. And we'll put in here the word footer just so we can see it. There it is. It doesn't really have a height. So I can come back over here. I'm going to take my header and copy it. And then change it to footer. I'll give it 100 pixels height too. And I never moved this back to 3. So there you see it's really easy to do a layout. All right, so what about those 2 sections that we wanted to put inside our main content area? Remember, we wanted to subdivide this. We don't want the whole thing divided, so maybe I want some lorem ipsum or some words in here. Let's do that. So inside my section, let's put a paragraph. I'll go ahead and make this H3. For the main content, and then I'll put a paragraph in. And then let's go out to get some lorem ipsum. Here's our generator. I'll just take what they got here. And I'll put that in here just to fill up some space. Oop, it's long. Doesn't fit on our screen very well. There we go. There's our paragraph. All right, so we got our main content, and then maybe we want to have 2 areas for pictures down here side by side. Okay, so inside this section, I want to put a couple divs maybe to hold my pictures, right? So I'm inside the section. It's before the end of that section. I'm going to put a div. So this section was 10 pixels wide, or excuse me, 10 column. No, see, I screwed up my whole plan. I made this grid 9, so I'm going to change this to 3 and 10, 2 and 10. So I can evenly divide this up. Actually, I won't. I'm going to leave it 3 and 9. I screwed up. I'll pay the price. Oh no. Oh, that's because of my div down here. All right, let's just go ahead and work here. Pay no attention to that because while I have this div open. So we're going to do 3 divs here, and we're going to make them evenly spaced. Grid 9, I can divide that into 3, 3, and 3, right? So class equals grid underscore 3. And I will make it I did green already. Blue. And I'll put a slash div here. And pick goes here. Okay. And I want to do something else here. I'm just going to copy this. So we have these, I'll call this pick 1, this one pick 2, and that one pick 3. And I'll just change their colors. Indigo and violet. Since I've made all those colors, let's use them. So 3 divs, all of them are class 3 because this section is 9. So 3, 3, and 3 adds up to 9. Okay. Now we have a problem. Actually, I've got another problem. I'm missing this. Missing a quotation mark here. All right, so our layout's fixed. The 3 don't fit. Why don't they fit? Because they're 3, 3, and 3, and this is 9, right? Well, there is a problem that happens when you try to nest grids inside other grids. And it's the fact that there's 20 pixels of margin to the left of this blue one, but there's already margin out here, right? And there's 20 pixels of margin to the right of this pink one, but there's already margin out here. And when you add those up, this extra on the first section here and the extra on the second section here keeps them from fitting. But guess what? There's something in there to fit that, to fix that. If you're doing sections, grids inside other grids, your first grid needs to have the designation of class alpha. Alpha means beginning, right? Alpha and omega, Greek letters. First letter of the Greek alphabet is alpha, the last letter is omega. You might know that from Sunday school class. There's a verse in the Christian Bible that says something about Jesus being the alpha and the omega, the first and the last, right? So the first section has to have an alpha on it, which basically takes away its extra margin. And the last section has to have an omega on it. So those are alpha and omega classes are built in, and they're to fix the problem when you nest classes inside other classes. The first one, add the alpha. The last one that you're nesting, add the omega. And we save it, and now they fit. right? It took off that extra margin to the left of this blue one and the extra margin to the right of that pink one, because we already have some margin out there that was provided by the section. And we can go back and add a height on all those if we want to. I'm not going to. You get the idea now. By now you get the idea. This is really what you need to know to do a quick website. It's much quicker than the process you went through before. So maybe I want another paragraph. Let's do that. Another paragraph after my pictures. Did I save it? There's my paragraph after my pictures. Now, one thing you are seeing is that if you wanted space between like your header and the things underneath it, you still probably need to go set up a few paddings and margins and things. And the other thing to point out is that these classes with these colors don't have to be there. You could add borders around these. You could have a black background here instead of a white background, or put white backgrounds on all these sections, and they would just look like they're part of a page, kind of like the samples did, that's filled out in columns. You don't have to have a bunch of wild different colors. Please don't. I only do that so that you can see what's going on for formatting in these examples. 960 wide, it stays 960 no matter what. The rest gets divided up on each side with whatever the background color of our body is. So you get the idea. Now your assignment is to just create a page. It can be, I'm going to create it about anything you want. Pick an interest, one of your interests, one of your hobbies. If you're into dirt bikes, give me a page on dirt bikes. Put a couple pictures on it. Do a layout. It doesn't have to be a layout like this, but it needs to make use of some columns and maybe some pictures, maybe a picture gallery. Be creative, but use the 960 framework. I am going to provide an assignment link so you can accept the assignment, and then you'll get your address and you can clone. And it's going to have the starter code in there. I'm going to give you starter code that has a basic index page set up with the links in it and a site.css file. It'll all be blank, and you'll build your page in there, and then you can push it back up. Now that'll be using command line get. So you'll have to learn how to use get clone, which you've already cloned in Visual Studio, but you can use the get clone command. I will probably add a video on using the command, but I bet you can probably figure it out just by looking it up, because you have used it inside Visual Studio. Just this time you're going to have to type it. And it's basically get clone and the address of your repo, and it will clone it down to your computer inside the folder where you're at when you run it. So that's it. 960 framework. It's real easy. Now, it's not great for doing mobile applications or things on phones because it doesn't adjust in size, but it's the first step towards that, because the next thing we're going to do in a few weeks is work with some systems that let you use 12 column layouts, but let you adjust them for phones and things like that. So this is the first step towards that.